you very much for taking a little time for us after the busy rehearsal and
pleasure
before the next performance. And of course, my first question has to be, why do you bring together Britain with Haydn, which is a really unusual thing to do?
It's actually quite easy. It's quite, sort of, in my head anyway, my strange thing, my makeup. It's quite logical because, for me, the Haydn symphony is more of a suite than a symphony. There are sort of lots of dance elements in there. You've got a bit of a pavane, you've got some galliard, you've got all sorts of dance influences. And it's also because, you know, it was Marie Antoinette's favorite symphony that she loved it the most, and apparently she played the second movement just before she went and had her head chopped off. So there's that combination. So you have the Queen, and Gloriana, the subject is obviously the Queen, and in the last movement of the suite, it's her death. So there's a sort of correlation between the death of Elizabeth I and Marie Antoinette, who's a completely different sort of queen for England and France. You know, and I live in France, so I'm English. So there are all sorts of resonances going on there. And I just thought it would be fun to do something different with a Haydn symphony rather than, you know, the traditional sort of overture Haydn symphony or whatever else. And this struck me as being an original and kind of interesting and logical communication, in my head anyway, between the pieces. So that's why it came across. And the Beethoven in the second half of the program is because I didn't want the Emperor Concerto. I could have gone for Queens and royalty all around, you know. But I thought, no. And the fourth is more sort of feminine in it's very noble, you know, just that G major opening is an amazingly noble, very feminine statement, I think. It's not a masculine statement, at least to my, how you define masculinity and femininity in music, that's a different thing. But to my mind, it's not as masculine as the Emperor Concerto, for instance. And so I thought it went better with the two queens that we had in the first half. Right. So that's how it came about.
I'd like to ask you something more about the royal theme that you took, because it also brings to our attention that in those times, especially in Elizabeth's time, but also in Marie Antoinette's time, music and art in general was mostly commissioned.
Yeah.
Now these pieces were not commissioned exactly, but they were written in homage. Britain writes in homage to Queen Elizabeth I, and then the piece was staged for the occasion of the coronation of this Queen Elizabeth II today.
Yeah.
But it wasn't particularly appropriate because there we have a heroine who is a tragic heroine.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was a commission from Britain to write the opera because it was Lord Howard, who was a cousin of the present Queen, who was a very highly educated and refined man who was a music lover, and you know, as you probably know. And he asked Britain to write the piece, and he suggested the text. He suggested and then Britain got together with Ploma, a South African writer, actually, and together they got this going. But the idea came from Lord Howard to concentrate on the tragic relationship between Queen Elizabeth I and the Earl of Essex. And it's true that at the first performance, people weren't expecting a kind of tragic thing. You know, for the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II, you weren't thinking that he was going to concentrate on the tragic side of a relationship. And so it wasn't a great success, neither for the public nor for the critics. They were expecting something else, you know, in our great English way. They were expecting something and didn't get it, so they weren't happy. But then afterwards, gradually, it's become appreciated in a different sort of way. So yes, if that answers your question, it sort of does.
Yeah, it sort of does. Yeah, I was thinking also that those queens of former times become figures, characters that sort of traveled through the arts on their own after a while.
Oh, absolutely, yes. And if you think of what Queen Elizabeth I did for the arts, you know, everything that happened in that golden age, in the Renaissance in England, is unbelievable. And in France at the time of Marie Antoinette, there were some amazing things happening just before the revolution. That's funny how the feeling of the revolution, that tension, you feel it in the painting, you feel it in the music, you feel all around. You're not sure what's going to happen. It's a bit like, you know, in Russia when Gorbachev was sort of kidnapped and taken down to the south before, and I happened to be in Russia at that time. You could feel something strange in the air. You weren't sure what was going to happen, but you could feel it. And I think that before the French Revolution, there's something in the arts that's happening that's very special. And the Haydn Symphony was commissioned you know, in France just at that time. So it's amazing, and you feel there's something special. There's something kind of very dramatic in Haydn's music. Whether he felt the revolution coming, I don't know. But
Britain holds a very special place in your own repertoire as well. There's so many connections, obviously. The Glyndebourne Festival and the Aldeburgh Festival, which are strongly connected to Britain's name. And you are sort of a missionary of Britain's works in Germany, because it's so rarely played here and not much appreciated.
Yeah, it's a shame. A missionary, I don't know. I mean, my parents are, well, almost missionaries, so I take that sort of. But yeah, I had a very close relationship at one period in my sort of early playing career with the Aldeburgh Festival, where I would go regularly and play for the master classes. So it was Peter Pears, Elizabeth Schwarzkopf, Hans Hotter, Wisniewskaja, all these people there. And so I played for their master classes, and that was my relationship. And then I conducted 2 or 3 student productions there. They have a wonderful student orchestra, which is basically selected from all the London music colleges and from the north as well, from Northern College. And they all come together 2 or 3 times a year. And it's full of people who later become soloists, big famous names, you know, that we know. And so the orchestra is fantastic, and young singers who also have a huge potential and become famous names afterwards. So it's a great place to go and work, and I did that 2 or 3 times.
So, well, talking about working with so many inspiring people, the soloist of tonight and tomorrow night is Yevgeny Korolyov. What is different about working with him, who is now here an artist in residence, rather than with those soloists who come to visit for only one concert?
Well, I think the possibility of establishing more of a relationship, although sadly I only do one concert with him, or one series of concerts with him, but he can establish a relationship with the musicians, and so it builds up something that's much more intense and a special relationship. Whereas if you get a soloist who just comes in for, okay, well, I'll do a gig, you know, in Duisburg, and then I go away again. This is a different sort of investment, personal investment, and that's really
perhaps needed, especially for bringing out the female quality that you see in the fourth.
Absolutely, he plays it in a very, very refined, noble, feminine way. If you can talk about that. I'm not sure you can even talk about feminine and masculine music, what that means. But yes, it's certainly not big and butch.
Maybe in the sense of communication and
absolutely,
dialogue between the instruments.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a sort of there's a different way that ladies communicate and gentlemen communicate.
Well, thank you very much for communicating with me.
Thank you for having me communicate.
Looking forward to the concert. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.